Hey, family, it's your sister Jocelyn here, and welcome to another episode of Faith on the Journey. If this is your first time tuning in, we welcome you. We are so glad that you are here and want you to know that we're committed to helping you strengthen your faith, heal your heart, and discover a sense of community. And we do so by connecting you with a wonderful team of Christian counselors, by offering trauma healing groups, which are Bible studies to help you heal from trauma, and helping churches to start trauma healing ministries across the country. You can learn about these resources and so much more by visiting our website at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that is faithonthejourney.org. So today we have part two of a wonderful conversation with my sister, Elaine Robinson Beattie. Now, if you had not checked out part one, you need to go back and listen because we were talking about toxic work environments and the process of healing from that. Such a dynamic conversation. And today we're actually talking about collective leadership trauma, which is something that so many leaders across the country have experienced. And so I'm very excited to welcome her back on the show for a part two as we dive into this amazing conversation. So, welcome back to the show, Elaine.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure, as always, to be with you and to be talking about these really important issues of trauma.
Yes, yeah, and let's just dive right into it. As I mentioned last week, you have so much experience working with Fortune 500 countries across the country and in the United States and Canada. You've seen many work environments. And so, let's talk about some of the things that you've recognized in your work around collective leadership trauma.
So, as leaders, we're just called to just show up, to be there, to just make it happen. And we, no matter what, have to get the job done. We always have to be on. When does the leader get to grieve? When does the leader get to fall apart? When does the leader get to rest? When does the leader get to stop?
I had my mic muted, but I was sitting here saying, behind the scenes because it's true. It's like no rest for the weary, no rest for the leader. We're constantly going, pushing through pandemics, pushing through civil unrest, pushing through violence, pushing through all these things. And we're supposed to, quote unquote, these are big air quotes, have it all together and not have our moments when in reality we don't have an S on our chest. We're not superhuman.
Going and going and going and going and going.
Right. It's not sustainable, right? But let's talk about where this expectation comes from because I think there is societal expectations around leaders that are not fair. So what do you think forms this? Where does this illusion come from?
I think it is exactly what you said. There is an unrealistic expectation that leaders are just supposed to just do it. And unfortunately, it's that patriarchal framework that has been set up by men, and most environments have been set up by men for years. And it's not fair for men either. But men, women, we've all entered into this workforce, and it is unhealthy, it is unfair, it is unrealistic. And now you have five generations in the workforce. You have this new generation, unfortunately, that has experienced all kinds of violence in their lifetime. We now have, unfortunately, this horrible experience of mass shootings that continues day after day, week after week. And you have school leaders that must live day after day, week after week. When do they get to grieve? That's what collective trauma for leaders looks like.
That is so real, and it's tough because, again, it's pushing against the framework of, well, we need to keep going, especially in certain fields that are service-oriented. It's like, well, we gotta keep serving others, but if we don't continue to care for ourselves in some capacity, at some point, we're going to break down, and so I wanna talk about that. How does the collective leadership trauma impact us in the workplace? What are some of the side effects, if you will, if we continue to ignore the trauma that we've experienced and not actually tend to it?
I've seen it. People literally start breaking down. Relationships start breaking down. The work doesn't get done right, correctly. You actually start seeing the standards not being honored. There's so many ways it starts to be affected. You see people not showing up to work, turnover increases. You start seeing hostility in the workforce. Oh my gosh.
These are examples that I've witnessed many of those as well. And I guess the question comes down to like, what do we do in situations like this when we realize that again, everybody's experienced a pandemic. We know that. And then in certain areas, in Chicagoland areas where I'm from, violence is high. There's certain things that many organizations have experienced, and they might not know what to do as a result of those things in terms of responding other than just pressing through. So, what are some suggestions that you have pertaining to that?
I really think it is important that leaders be authentic. And I think that leaders must stand and say first to each other that I am feeling this. I am feeling the stress. I am feeling afraid. I am sad. I am tired. I am exhausted. I am whatever to each other. To just stop working and just stop and share their feelings. Okay, so that's like, ooh, men say, like, oh my God, you have to do it.
The first word that comes to mind is vulnerability, and that is scary, right? Because it's, again, going against societal norms that we're supposed to have things all together as a leader. But if I tell someone who I'm supposed to supervise that I'm on the struggle bus, as I like to call it, and I don't have it all together, will they look at me like I'm not a good leader? Might be something that comes to mind. So, how do you address that if someone's really scared about being vulnerable and being seen as weak in a situation, what paradigm shift or what words can you offer someone to give them that paradigm shift?
Quite frankly, when I'm teaching management and leadership, I have created a leadership and management training program. And I am teaching my younger managers that in order to be what I call an intentional and inclusive leader, that it's important to, number one, be courageous. And being courageous is showing vulnerability. Being courageous is being honest. And when we do that, we show certain part of our leadership that then becomes compelling, and it draws people to us in a way that then becomes inspiring.
Yeah, I love that. That's good. That's good. And along the way, Elaine, in your work, I'm sure that you've witnessed some common missteps that people might make when addressing collective trauma in the workplace. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, ignoring it, ignoring that trauma has occurred, right? Now, again, the pandemic was just too big, was just too big to ignore, right? Like it happened. It actually happened, right? I mean, we've had some big stuff happen in America. 9/11, these mass shootings. I mean, a lot of things have happened, but a lot of companies still keep going. We have to make sure that we have to take time and literally stop. I think the expectation that people keep working is really, it's more than unfair. I would almost go as far as to say almost inhuman. And that's a big misstep. When we don't give the people the space and the time, when we don't literally give leaders the space and time. And I've seen this in the church. I did a retreat for pastors, female pastors, several months ago. They had not had the time to process the pandemic. They had lost family members. They had lost congregation members in their congregation. They had lost, sisters, right? Clergy sisters. They were wailing in this retreat. We couldn't even get to the stuff I wanted to get to because they had not been able to process.
That's so sad. That and I think that if we really take time to talk to our people, our tribe, the people who we work with in the workplace, and even create space to ask a simple question, but in an authentic way where we ask, "How are you doing?" And not just saying, "Hey, how you doing?" Keep walking, but literally, "How are you doing?" We just had a mass shooting. George Floyd just lost his life, or sadly, so many other people who have been killed by police brutality. Whatever it is, it affects people, and sometimes we just don't talk about it.
Well, and again, I work with a restaurant company. Several of the locations they were having the protest, in the area of their restaurant. And I made sure to say to them, you must ask your employees how are they doing? Because guess what? Their employees are part of the community. And I know we just drifted a little bit off of leadership, but the point is you have to make space and ask people how they're doing. So let me go back to leadership. We must, as a leadership team, ask each other, how are we doing? We must take the time and the space. So back to your original question. The misstep is we must take the time. You might say, I don't have the time. You make the time.
The trauma healing has actually given us an opportunity to truly share some of the pain that we've gone through that has caused us to be in this place. And we're no longer feeling that we can't say anything, that we're not to discuss it. It allowed me to be free with some deep rooted things that I never spoke and know that it was all right for me to speak them. There was no judgment. It more or less said that this is okay, that this is what's needed. Grief is difficult because we don't ever address how we got there. I read something that said grief is the onset, but actually trauma is the onset. And from there we move. There's a progression that we move from. It brought to the forefront things I had never really talked about, or I had talked about, but just like grazed over. I never spent time in that space, but it also allowed me to see how the things in my past were connected to some of the things I was going through in my present time. And even though the present situations weren't as traumatizing, but because there was a root here, it made this even more horrific. But once I got to that place of understanding how this kind of really does work, I had a moment of complete release. In that release, I was able to truly open up, even if it wasn't to anyone but to me and God, but to truly open up about some of the things that I had been suppressing or trying to suppress for years.
And in making the time, this kind of leads into the next question that I have for you. What steps do we take to make a healing culture for people? The world might be crazy around us, but we can create an environment where people feel safe, which we talked about that in our last episode, the importance of addressing toxic work environments. But if we can create a safe environment for people, a healing culture for people, then they will want to come to work. They'll thrive in the workplace. What are some things that we can do to create that healing culture, that safe culture for people?
Yeah, just reminding them that there are benefits like, again, the opportunity to engage a therapist or a counselor, that there's the employee assistance programs. Have you called a therapist, a coach, somebody, or support systems? Have you taken a day off, a mental health day? Are you using your vacation time? I make sure I ask people, have you scheduled your vacation? When's the last time you've taken your vacation? People sometimes do, bang on their chest. I've saved up my vacation. Really? That's not something to brag about. So we need to make sure that we are encouraging people to take advantage of their benefits.
That's huge. I was laughing backstage on that one because oftentimes you're right. Sometimes leadership, in contrast, will affirm those who never take vacation, but that's not good. You need that time, to rejuvenate, to restore, and I think that that kind of goes into my next question. Sometimes small nonprofits might not be able to pay for someone's counseling or offer that particular service, but there are things that they can do, I heard, like encouraging you to take vacation, maybe having a culture where you have a mental health day. I've heard people say that where you don't need a reason to take a day off. You could just take a day for your mental health each month to just restore. Things like that valued as a leader. I think it's important for us to show that for our other leaders on staff and anyone who's working, that we value you as a person and not just for your outputs of what you can do.
Yeah, Jocelyn, you just reminded me. I was part of a nonprofit organization, and one of the young ladies that worked with us, she was part of the leadership team. She actually had a very serious injury, and she was no longer part of the staff. Like she literally became paralyzed, and it was devastating, devastating to all of us. They literally brought in grief counselors for us. I've never seen this happen, and we all processed the grief together. It was the most amazing experience I have ever seen. So, this was us processing collective trauma, right? Collective grief. It was the most beautiful experience. I heard things that I had no idea people were experiencing. I mean, the men were crying. I miss her. I did. I heard things that I had no idea that the people were experiencing. So organizations will find value. And as opposed to having everybody everywhere, spend the money. Take one day, shut the organization down, let everybody experience it together, and then we can move on.
Yeah. I think this goes back to, what you said previously about the importance of just the time. Just taking the time, taking a day, just take a meeting. You don't even have to take the whole day sometimes. Just to acknowledge and not ignore is vitally important.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing with leaders. You've been doing this work for quite some time. So talk about your leadership coaching and some of the other things you do to support organizations.
I have been in leadership forever, and unfortunately, I got to the point where I experienced burnout. And I remember just praying one day, and the Lord just really put it on my heart that I was created to support leaders. And the word that came to me was to make sure that leaders finished before they fainted. He wanted me to help them finish before they fainted. And so I'm sold out. I am sold out.
I love that because we do feel like fading sometimes.
Yes. Yes. So whatever it is, I help clergy, I help leaders in nonprofit, in corporate America, whatever position because I've worked them all, right? So I really want to help leaders work more efficiently and more effective. That can be personally, but I also help develop leadership teams because that's where the rubber meets the road, right? I can help you, but the real help is having somebody hold up your arms, right? Making sure that you've got people underneath you who can do the work, people that you can delegate to, right? So you can take the cape off, right? And delegate, right? Take that cape off and delegate, right? Really. And so that you've got people to, a succession of leaders, and also the ability to be able to build and develop, right? I love that. So that's one part of it. And then the other is really making sure that we're building skills, right? We're building skills, and moving people from middle management into executive management, and particularly looking at people of color, getting them into positions of executive leadership.
That's great. It's so needed. And just going back to your tagline, I don't know if it's your official tagline, but I love it. Finish before you faint. Well, for someone right now who's a leader who feels like fainting and they are on the verge of quitting or just, completely tapping out, what words of advice or encouragement would you give them?
Create and look for and pray for a support system. Leadership is not a singular sport, it's a community opportunity. We do leadership with community. So build a support system. Build a support system.
That's it. You can't lead if you have no one to lead. So,
You can't lead if you don't have people following you.
yes. That's essential. So use the resources around you, whether it's volunteers.
And as a leader, you need a mentor, you need a sponsor, you need a therapist, you need a coach, you need a good friend, you need family. That's what I'm talking about. That's what you need, a support system.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope you all are listening. Very true. And the beautiful thing that you do, Elaine, that I love is that these resources, these tools, now you also have a podcast where you're talking about these things, especially for our women. Lead Her podcast. I know we talked about it last week, but I encourage you just to say something really quickly about that because I want people to take advantage of that.
Yeah, Lead Her Talks is specifically designed for women. And my girlfriend, Reverend Dr. Shannon Carafonda, we said we want to develop a podcast where we talk about the things we wish we knew in our earlier years in leadership. And so we talk about those things and we laugh and we talk about those things like, dang, we wish we knew that in our earlier years. So we talk about mentorship and sponsorship. We talk about the growth mindset. We'll be talking about hostile work environment. We'll be talking about those things that we really hope that you'll grab a hold onto.
Awesome. Awesome. I encourage everyone to check that out and also just reach out to Elaine whether you need someone as a speaker to teach on leadership or need someone as a coach. There's a number of things that Elaine does. She's just a wealth of knowledge and wisdom. And so I hope you reach out to her at her website elainespeaking.com or you can find her at Elaine Speaking on Facebook and she's on all those other social media platforms as well which you will put in the show notes for you. But Elaine, you are such a blessing to me. I'm so grateful to have you as my mentor, as my sponsor, who's helped me in some very difficult times as I was growing as a leader. So, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you so much. I'm so proud of you. You're doing great work, and I know it's just going to grow and grow and grow. God bless you, and just keep doing the things that you're doing.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you. And thank you all for tuning into this episode. I hope you were blessed by it. And if you were, I encourage you to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, subscribe on YouTube, and share this message with a friend so we can help to get it out to the world. So that's it for this week. Be sure to take advantage of all of our resources on our website on faithonthejourney.org, where you can connect with a Christian counselor, find out about our trainings for trauma healing groups, and so much more. So we look forward to seeing you next week on the show. But until next time, you keep your faith on the journey. I'll see you soon, family.